Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Outside the door, hospital life was buzzing. Jacob sat at the resident's desk and filled out the histories of his patients. When he was a student, he had learned to disconnect from everything that interfered with thinking. It was a useful skill he used whenever work was at its fullest the previous night. The same thing had happened. An emergency situation had occurred. After midnight, a bleeding man was brought to the ward. The victim was brought in on a cart. Friends, drinking buddies, who, like the wounded man himself, were far from a little over. Interrupting each other, they told the doctor on duty. "How did the accident happen?" "Doc, we were just sitting around and nothing. And then Leo wanted to do an experiment. His wife keeps reproaching him for not being a man, like Leo's hands don't grow from there. So Leo decided to prove her wrong." From the story, accompanying the patient, Jacob realized that Leo dope in his head wanted to work with metal. But when he turned on the machine, which many years ago he had installed in the garage, something went wrong. The iron from which the accumulated in the houseman was going to make a flower broke out of his hands, and the sharp end entered the stomach. Although they were drinking themselves, they could hardly keep on their feet, and they realized that their friend could give God his soul, because one of the companions to the place of the banquet arrived by horse-drawn transport. They decided not to call an ambulance. "Guys, finally, we'll get to the hospital faster. Otherwise, while our medics arrive, Leo will be glued to his flippers." The owner of the truck was very close to the truth, because the surgeon had to urgently gather a team to save the inadequate. The medics spent almost 4 hours to eliminate the consequences of the favorite experiment. The course of the operation was also complicated by the fact that anesthesia did not take the patient for a long time, and everyone was afraid that he would die from a great loss. But the man crawled out of the clutches of death and barely came off the anesthesia. With astonishment, examined the neighbors on the ward. "Guys, where are we? I don't know this place, and my head is ringing like a bell. Let me get a hangover." It so happened that the patient uttered these first words after the operation during his morning rounds. However, Leo mistook Jacob for one of his friends. But the doctor calmly responded to the patient's request. "Everything, brother, today is canceled. And in general, you will have to stop drinking." Leo shrieked, holding his hand over his stitched-up stomach. "No way, and who are you to tell me what to do?" Jacob calmly began to explain to the patient that he was in the hospital. Only Leo began to understand something, as at that very moment a furious woman with a red mop of hair on her head burst into the room. Not paying attention to the doctors and patients, she rushed to the love and began to shake his infirm body. "Why did you trash the garage? How many times have I asked you not to drive drunkards? But you just can't help yourself." Rough physical impact caused the victim a lot of pain. And he screamed. Raya's supposed to. "I'm in pain, of course." Jacob didn't expect to see such an impressive scene of family strife play out before his eyes. In the first seconds, he was a little confused, and then resolutely stood between the indignant woman and the patient's bed. "Ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing here? We barely saved your husband. Leave the room." The doctor's actions, especially his decisive tone, had a sobering effect on Emily, although she, unlike her husband, had no inclination to drink hard liquor. The woman folded her arms on, breasts of metal. "I'm sorry I'm not myself. He's poisoned my whole life. I can't stand this outrage anymore." Leo intuitively felt that the situation had changed in his favor, and with a pained expression on his face began to justify himself to Ray's wife. "It's all demons. Remember, I told you that the evil force has been hunting for me for a long time. And yesterday, too, as soon as I drank red wine, they and a few other devils began to persuade me to turn on the machine. They told me that I could be the second, and that my work would soon be auctioned off for the price of a nice yacht." The woman mumbled through her tears. "You're a fool, Leo." Turning to Jacob, she began to explain. "My Leo has had an extraordinary talent since childhood. When he was young, he studied to be an artist and drew pictures." Leo interrupted his wife. "How many times can I tell you that they paint pictures? They paint the remarks of the husband." Emily did not react and continued, painted paintings for sale. And then out of the blue, I started singing. I did everything I could to stop him. I chased his friends away. I spiked his vodka with note grass, all to no avail. Leo chuckled. I'm like that. You can't test me with anything. His wife threw a threatening look in his direction and whispered, Doctor, I wish I'd had time to ask you to stitch that ampoule in his stomach before the operation. You know what I mean. Emily looked pleadingly straight into his eyes, and Jacob did not know how to answer her culturally. After a long pause, he said, I understand your anguish, but you are addressing the wrong address. At Emily's eyes sparkled in tears, and she reproachfully declared, Right people say that our medicine is not capable of anything. Vaughn knew that over-the-river lives puts everyone on their feet, does not refuse anyone. The nurse, who was also present in the ward during the rounds, caught a threatening note in the voice of the local resident, and became, you are right, to pull Emily out of the room. Go, please, do not interfere with the doctor examining the patients. Proudly shook the red-haired punches. Emily left the room and Jacob was able to continue examining his patients. After the rounds, Nurse Tonika, as if, by the way, told the doctor you are a new person at us, and have not yet had time to get acquainted with the peculiarities of local life. The fact is that specialists do not stay with us for long, so the population is forced to turn to healers, although most of such healers are charlatans. There is no other alternative. It is true that a young witch doctor who settled 3 years ago by the river really helps people. Tamichka wanted to add something else to her story, but at the last second she changed her mind. Jacob did not pay much attention to her words, although there was a case in his life, confirming the high effectiveness of unconventional methods of treatment. The man tried not to remember about that period, as it caused heartache. In Jacob's life, there were many difficult moments that he wanted to forget about. More than once he tried to start from scratch, but he did not always succeed. He had set out a month ago with such intentions too, although he hadn't planned a change of residence. But in the surgical department of the city hospital, where he had worked for almost 7 years, there was an unhealthy environment. And it happened after the superintendent appointed a reprimand Peter after the retirement of the old superintendent. The duties of the head for almost 6 months performed Jacob, and everyone was convinced that his candidacy is about to be approved at the top. But these optimistic predictions were not destined to come true. One morning, Jacob habitually opened the door of his office and froze from surprise. Behind his desk, a strange man stretched out languidly. Jacob did not start a scandal and delicately asked, Sorry, I do not know what to call you, but I wonder why you are in my office. The guest jumped up and in one leap crossed the distance separating them, without giving Jacob a second thought. He shyly embraced him. Jacob, my friend, don't you recognize me? Jacob took a closer look and hardly recognized the fat man. If you take off the smugness of Peter's face, who in his student years was a course younger than him, already then about this guy there were ambiguous rumors that like this is the son of an official from the highest echelon, and therefore in front of him automatically open all the doors, because Jacob did not have to previously cross paths with Peter, as he was called in the eyes of acquaintances. He did not pay attention to such gossip. Jacob didn't think fate would bring him back together with this upstart. 15 years after graduation, Peter's embrace lasted longer than the time foreseen for this summer. So Jacob had to use force to free himself from his guest. He responded to Peter's ebullient greeting, quite restrained. I'm sorry, I really didn't recognize you right away. You've changed a lot, you know. Peter immediately took offense. Every man has his faults. Although, in principle, my imposing build does not cause me much discomfort. Genetics is to blame. My appetite is fine. We're all Peter people, but I don't consider it a disadvantage. Jacob did not want to listen to the summarily speech of the visitors, because he had a busy working day ahead of him. Peter, I basically don't care what your weight is, and I'm not interested in other people's personal problems. It's surgery day, and every minute counts. But I realize it's no coincidence that you're in my office this morning. I'd like to hear an explanation for this intrusion. Peter was much shorter than Jacob, and he did not succeed in looking down on his rival. He thrust up his chin and spoke defiantly to Jacob. "This is not an invasion. As of today, I am acting superintendent. My nomination was approved last night." There was an awkward pause. Apparently, Peter expected his opponent to object or bemoan the loss of his position. But Jacob took the news very calmly. "Thank you. Now everything is clear." Jacob quickly gathered his papers and headed for the exit. "That's it. I've cleared the room. You can settle in." Peter barely shook his head, making it clear that from this day on he would decide whom to punish and whom to pardon. And indeed, with the appearance of a new head, the situation in the department has deteriorated sharply. Not only Peter had no practical experience, but he was giving out his recommendations left and right. Peter brought his own staff to the department, which the old workers did not want to put up with. To their discontent, the new manager replied, "I'm not keeping anyone here who doesn't like a free exit. There are no irreplaceable people." Jacob tried to reason with Peter. "Peter, I think you got off on the wrong foot. You can't throw away experienced personnel like that. After all, medicine is a field where the loss of one good fighter can affect the result of the entire battle." Peter's sensible remark has got his chin up again. "Jacob, I do not need your advice. My main task is to organize the work in the unit entrusted to me, and I will pursue that goal with all means at my disposal. Do you like it or not?" Jacob had to keep his opinions to himself. In a few months at the helm, Peter had dispersed the old staff. He encouraged snitching in every possible way and liked to organize at the meetings demonstrative floggings of the guilty. At the same time, Peter completely disregarded the rules of medical anthology. When Jacob reprimanded him, he in his characteristic manner replied, "I do not care about your offenses. In my department, everyone has to work with the utmost dedication, and people worked hard. Many could not stand such a schedule and left." Only Jacob continued to believe that things could change for the better. But as the days went by, months went by, and the situation only worsened. It became completely unbearable when Peter single-handedly, without coordination with common sense, began to promote the products of his own relative, who headed a large pharmaceutical company. Since Jacob was the lead surgeon, the superintendent summoned him to her office. Jacob intuitively felt that the upcoming conversation did not bode well for him. Peter, as always, with ostentatious arrogance said, "Sit down, Jacob. You know yourself. There is no truth in feet." Familial address cut on the nerves, but Jacob restrained himself. "It's all right, Peter. I'll stand. I don't have time to sit around. The patients are waiting." The superintendent's face was distorted by a squeamish grimace. "Oh ho ho. You'd think you were indispensable. I have to start by reprimanding you. Remember once and for all, I am your boss and you are my subordinates, so address me properly. I mean by name and patronymic." The insolence of this self-loving baboon was infuriating. But Jacob emphasized, politely replied, "I have exactly the same counter-proposal for you. I, like you, have an extremely negative attitude to any manifestation of panic." Peter's eyebrows went up. "Even so. Well, I'll take that into consideration. Jacob, now let's get down to business." The superintendent tossed a small box across the table. "This is a new breakthrough drug developed by a domestic manufacturer. Look to whom in our department it can be assigned." Jacob immediately realized where the head of the department was bending. He forcefully pushed back the package with the drug. "I will not prescribe an unapproved drug. I'm ordering you." Peter's face reddened with indignation and covered with sweaty, twin sweats, but Jacob was not impressed by his anger. The surgeon firmly repeated, "I will not prescribe to the sick, untested remedies. And if you insist, Peter, I will appeal to the federal ministry. You don't think you alone have an omnipotent hand." After this altercation, the relationship between the chief and the lead surgeon soared completely. Peter, with the help of his snitches, watched the surgeon's every move. And when Jacob made an inexcusable mistake, refusing one patient in hospitalization, the head of the case blown up. Jacob was summoned to the regional department. They read out the entire form. He received a reprimand with a note and was deprived of a bonus for 6 months. Endless battles with the superintendent swamped Jacob. He felt on the verge of a breakdown and decided to have a man-to-man talk with Peter. Peter listened to him, and then with the same ostentatious superiority, said to Jacob, "Maybe I'll forgive you, if you ask me nicely." "Good. How's that?" Jacob expected the chief to start pushing that dubious drug on him again. But Peter came up with a more elegant punishment. When you need something badly, it's not a bad thing to get down on your knees. Jacob laughed outright. "Peter, you should definitely consult a psychiatrist. You're overcome with unhealthy fantasies." That same day, he wrote a letter of resignation. One of the best surgeons in the city had been out of work for a month. He was about to take a job in the ER when he got the call from Andrew. "Jacob, I heard a rumor that you're out of work." "Yeah, I took a short break, but I got some ideas. I'm looking to change the field a little bit." Andrew yelled into the phone. "Don't even think about it. You're a surgeon from God. You dropped in on me. I want to offer you a place." Andrew Jacob was in the same class with Andrew. They were on a humanitarian mission together in Africa, then their paths diverged. Andrew later graduated from the military department and was in hot spots. Once he was very unlucky and got a serious wound, after which he could not operate. When he was offered a position in the regional Ministry of Health, he accepted. As a man devoted to his favorite profession, Andrew did everything to save human life, in the global sense of the expression, having learned about the difficulties of Jacob, with whom they had been traveling around the world for several years. The high official immediately engaged in the employment of a friend. Jacob did not wait for a second invitation, and on the same day went to visit whom he greeted him warmly and immediately said, "There is a vacancy for a surgeon. Of course, you can refuse such an unenviable position, but this district hospital in the next 2 years will be renovated. I don't have to tell you what prospects await you." Jacob weighed the pros and cons and agreed to move to the backwoods. "Thank you, Andrew. I don't really have much of a choice, so I'll take you up on your offer." Andrew gave the surgeon a friendly pat on the shoulder. "A change of scenery will do you good. Perhaps in this you will meet your destiny." This wish embarrassed the man, who had long ago given up the search for his happiness. All his attempts to merge the family nest ended in painful losses, and he had long ago got rid of illusions. He put all his energies into his work. Sergiv was not distinguished by its scale. This small town is nestled on a hill and terrain. From the cave they are along and across, large and small rivulets. Many natural water bodies did not have names for easy orientation. The local population used such terms as the river behind the dark forest, or the river near the poultry farm. Molly learned the peculiarities of local toponymy as a child, when she and her mother came to visit Wendy. But in 20 years, things have changed. Even in such a wooded corner as Native Village, only an unnamed rivulet, flowing almost right next to the house. The old Snackar still rolled merrily in its waters into the unknown distance. In the spring, it fell apart, flooding the nearby meadows, but by the end of May it returned to its usual course again. And then it could be waded across on any property. Wendy's modest home had long ago been on a topsy-turvy path. For dozens of years, this woman had been doing her best to help the people of the district center and the small villages scattered on both sides of the creek. When Znaharina finished her earthly journey, the baton was taken over by her young relative Molly, appeared in the cabin across the creek in the middle of winter. In midsummer, she gave birth to a baby boy. The villagers told various legends about the girl and the unknown father of her child. Although more than 3 years have passed since that time, the folk myth-making has not died down. Of course, to the very heroine of these stories reached the scandalous rumors. But Molly did not attach any importance to them. When especially curious comrades pestered the girl with questions, she smilingly answered all sorts of in their own sophisticated. Such an answer caused misunderstanding and gossip. And try to find out whether you do not care what people say about the forest with the same childish smile answered, "Let them talk." That's what language is given to man to speak. A smart person would think before believing such stories. They are clever. Everything is forgivable for such people. Such statements of the young Snackar caused bewilderment. A girl of 25, no more than 25, and she talks as if she had a whole life behind her. However, those who expressed such an opinion was not far from the truth, because in her short life, this girl had time to learn and the bitterness of the loss of a loved one and betrayal of a friend. But she did not break and continued to believe in people. A new day was just dawning brightly in the east, and Molly was already on her feet. She had set out a plan of work from the evening and now began to fulfill the first item of breakfast. If someone had told her 5 years ago that she would be counting minutes and seconds, Molly would not have believed such nonsense. The boy mumbled something in his sleep, and the young woman rushed to her son's crib. But the alarm was false, and she tiptoed into the miniature kitchen and began cooking. Although Molly had little culinary experience, she was pressured by her mother. "Daughter, remember once and for all, you can only cook food when you're in a good mood. If the hostess is angry or dissatisfied, it will definitely affect the taste of the food." Mom left this world more than 5 years ago, but her invisible presence Molly felt almost constantly. In the most difficult moments of life, she mentally turned to the only native person, and the image of her mother immediately appeared in front of her eyes. Today, also a deceased parent. Early in the morning, she visited her daughter. She was smiling as always, but the words spoken to her made the girl shudder. "Molly, don't trust those who make sweet promises. Be careful and take care of your son." The young woman pondered over this message from another world. While she was preparing breakfast for herself and her little son, she knew very well that the meaning of these words would be revealed later. It had happened more than once, but the girl never ceased to be amazed at the strange connection with the deceased, the mother, and the surprising truthfulness of her predictions. When it happened for the first time, she thought that on the background of wild stress, she was slowly going crazy to prevent unwanted consequences. Molly recounted verbatim to Wendy the conversations with the calm mother. But the old woman only grinned. "Don't be afraid. It's fate sending you signs through the image of her mother. Such messages should not be ignored." Molly didn't believe the old woman, who was also a very distant relative. "Grandma Wendy, it's all bullshit. I don't believe in all sorts of otherworldly forces and evil doom." Wendy looked at her so that it was her looks. Everything inside went cold. "You don't believe and you laugh in vain. It won't be long before you realize what you've been given this gift for, will you?" Molly laughed again. "Grandmother, do you consider the voices that trouble me a gift?" "Of course I do. After all, everything you hear comes true later. Almost everything. But it seems like pure coincidence to me. Remember, idiot, nothing in this world happens by chance. Everything has a meaning, but not everyone understands it." Grandma Wendy often said strange things. Many people were afraid of her, but they still went to her for help. Molly looked at the picture of Grandma Faith in the antique frame and sighed, "And Mommy left me. And you, Grandma, left without forgiving 6 too. But thank you for not forgetting, visiting nonetheless. I get only good signs from you, and I try to do good myself." Molly did not have time to finish this pleasant thought, because someone insistently knocked on the window, who came so early. The woman rushed to the door, but did not immediately manage with the shield. The knock was repeated to the landlady. She had to ask the early visitor, "Don't bang so loudly. You'll wake up the baby." The request was heard and the knocking stopped. The young snackar opened the door with difficulty and squeezed into the narrow space. Lucy Guest at once expressed her displeasure. "What are you so long entrenched or hiding? Who in the house from the eyes of strangers?" The visitor looked around, but found nothing suspicious. "I was going to visit you yesterday, but I didn't have time. So many things to do around the house, I have no time for anything. And then there's this damn splinter." The woman nodded at her bandaged palm. "I got it 3 days ago. I thought it was nothing, but it was just a fire burning and twitching inside." Molly asked for a guest. "Aunt Lucy, why don't you sit in the chair and I'll look at your arm?" Lucy lamented about her miserable life. The healer complied with the request, but as soon as the hand sign touched her arm, she cried out, "You be careful, or I might pass out from the pain." "I've had that happen to me before when I pulled a tooth. It took half an hour to pump me out." "Aunt Lucy, but I can't treat you if I can't see the wound." "I'm telling you it's a splinter. There's no wound. I'll unwrap the bandage myself. Kukushkin began to remove the bandage, and Molly did not hold back her exclamation when she saw the woman's palms swollen across the wall into her neck. Aunt Lucy here, already herbs and lotions, cannot help. You need to run to a surgeon immediately, or you may lose a limb. The visitor waved her inflamed palm. What kind of healer are you if you send me to a doctor? I don't take on anything I'm not sure of. In this case, I doubt conservative methods will help you. Lucy swung his sore arm again. Look, don't act so smart. You've got all these words and you expect me to believe you. You don't know anything, you're only good at twirling your tail. You can't do anything but twirl your tail around and take advantage of other people's fiancés. Molly knew about the character of this woman, but did not think that Aunt Lucy would allow herself such a prank in someone else's house. Trying to keep calm, she asked the guest, "Why did you come to me, for help or to humiliate? And please don't yell. I have a small child." But these requests could not stop Lucy. She began to denounce the witch doctor for all her sins. "Who are you to make a remark to me? In the old days, people like you were burned at the stake, and rightly so. Don't mess with the people, you charlatan." And the stranger's indignant cries of the visitors were interrupted by a child's crying. Little Zach jumped out in his pajamas and barefoot. He fought with fear and cried, "Mommy, I'm afraid this Aunt Witch will chase her away instead of apologizing and leaving the stranger's house." Lucy attacked the baby. "It wasn't me." "Apparently, boy, it's your mama. Let her tell you who she took you from. You can tell who your daddy is without her confession. Sam Jones, the naked eye can detect further mayhem in your home." Molly couldn't stand it. She went at the visitors with determination, although she was much larger than her in stature. "Aunt Lucy, leave nicely, or I'll have to use force." Lucy backed down, but she didn't give up. "We'll see who's who. I'll tell the police. Let him find out what kind of bird you are and what right you have to occupy this house. And I'll inform your superiors. Who are you really? And they'll broom you out of the poultry farm. You'll be sorry you ever messed with me." Before slamming the door, Molly, as calmly as possible, said, "Aunt Lucy, you go to the hospital right now. I hear there's a new surgeon there. They say he's very experienced." Instead of thanking her for the sound advice, Lucy launched a stone to slam all the doors shut. Then she muttered curses and headed out. Zach sobbed some more. Molly did her best to calm the baby. She pressed her son to her breast and whispered, "Don't be afraid. Sonny, we are with you. I won't give you to anyone." The mother's caress had a calming effect, and Zach became quiet. Molly continued to rock the baby in her arms, remembering how her mother always found the right words when children's troubles happened to her. Tears did not flow from her eyes. And the young woman silently whispered, "Mommy, how bad it is that you are not with me. We are all alone in this world." In her short life, Molly had experienced loneliness in all its forms. Her first conscious thoughts were related to this unpleasant feeling. But at an early age, she didn't understand why her daddy didn't want to play with her. When her mother was at work, at any request of the girl, the head of the Edwards family rudely replied, "I have no time to entertain you. You have plenty of toys. Go to your room." If Molly did not obey her father's orders, he would push her out the door. When William was particularly angry, he could miscalculate his strength, and his rough touches left bruises on the girl's arms. One day, the mother was worried sick when she saw purple spots on her daughter's hands. "Molly, where did you get that?" The daughter immediately blurted out, "Daddy did it to me." I didn't listen to him, and he got angry when he heard the girl's answer. William was furious. "Molly, who taught you to lie?" Such a little girl is already lying, noticing the wary look of his wife. The man began to explain to her excitedly. "Betty, who do you believe me, or this dog? You know very well that little children are prone to lying. Molly is an overly active little girl and is always bruising herself during her playtime." Betty replied, not right away. "See, I might have believed your version if it weren't for one thing: children are more likely to have bruises on their feet. And there are blue spots on the shoulders and arms. And it's hematoma-like in nature. It's not hard to figure out how they got there." Molly remembers well how, at these words of her mother, the father again threw her an angry look. But at the same time, he faintly asked her daughter, Tell Mommy it's not true. Have I ever hurt you? The man's question went unanswered because Molly ran off to her room. Already at the age of 5, she knew very well how an honest answer could turn out for her. She drew patterns on the horse glass with her finger until late at night and dreamed of a very different life. Betty, after that egregious incident, also drew the appropriate conclusions. She placed her daughter with friends or acquaintances for the time she was on duty. William did not object to this change, and when Molly returned home, he wryly remarked, "Ours is back. And how is it at other people's aunts' houses?" "Better than at home with Daddy, I guess." Although the girl didn't like the nomadic lifestyle, she answered her father's questions with an affirmative nod of her head. From then on, she stopped seeing William as Molly's father and protector, avoided talking to him at all costs, and tried not to be alone with a man from whom undisguised hatred emanated. Despite the differences between the spouses, the Edwards family was considered exemplary because in those years, above all valued above all material well-being. Neighbors, acquaintances openly envied the couple. Grandmothers in the evenings on the bench at the entrance discussed. Such good, positive people. Both doctors get a decent salary. They have a car. The apartment is also richly furnished. What else do you need for a happy life? This is a question Betty has not found an answer to for many years. Indeed, professionally, she and her husband were doing quite well. She was the head of the environmental department at the city hospital, while her husband held a senior position in a private clinic. His father, who had been a prominent financial official under the socialist system, had provided him with a warm place. The Edwards family was not in need either, although there was no extra money. But for all the apparent prosperity was not the main component of love. Betty and William studied at the same institute, but in different departments. What happens in a student environment? The young people first developed a friendly relationship. Betty was courted by William's friend, who then had an accident. In the most difficult moments, William gave the girl a friendly shoulder. "Betty, you can always count on me. You've lost a loved one, and I've lost my best friend. It seems to me that together you and I will be able to bear this loss more easily." The girl gratefully accepted the guy's words, but their relationship very soon ceased to be friendly. William told the girl Betty more and more insistently every day that you should let go of the past. You can't get your old love back, and you shouldn't dwell on it. You're a young, beautiful woman, and I think it's stupid to condemn yourself to loneliness. Believe me, 5 years will pass, and you will regret that you missed the opportunity to be happy. William made speeches like that almost every day, and Betty gave in. But there was one more thing that made her give in to the guy's entreaties. Soon after the tragic death of her fiancé, she realized that she was expecting a child. But William Edwards reacted positively to this fact. He assured the girl Vetui, "I consider it my duty to take care of my best friend's child. So the sooner you and I formalize the relationship, the better it will be for all of us." This confession completely reassured the girl, and she agreed to become William's wife. But apparently, the groom did not hold back and told his father that his young wife was expecting a child from another man. Edwards Sr. was furious, and without choosing words, began to reproach his son. Only a complete idiot could come up with such an idea. Have you seen any conscientious movies? Voluntarily take responsibility for someone else's child? Well, I'll tell you straight, son, once you've got it on your shoulders, you carry that burden until you get tired of it. But in my house, William has decided to correct his father. Betty's expecting a girl. I don't care, a girl or a boy. I do not wish to see her child in my home and will never acknowledge it. Of course, Molly was not privy to the backstory of its birth, but she did not have the opportunity to learn of her grandparents' love, as her father's parents ignored the fact of its very existence. William himself subsequently repudiated the commitment he had, in a burst of the kindest affection, willingly made before she was born. The truth that she was not his own daughter, Molly learned only after the death of her mother. Betty kept this family secret until her last breath. The sudden departure of her mother was a terrible blow to Molly. After all, Betty had never complained about her health. She ran in the mornings, and on weekends, she did not visit the swimming pool. This resilient woman seemed to have endless energy. Even William often joked about it. Betty, I'm sorry, but I often think there's a perpetual motion machine inside you. I'm completely exhausted by lunchtime, and there's no mistaking you. On such remarks, Molly's mother answered simply, William, unlike you, I cannot relax, so I try to always be in tone. The smile disappeared from the woman's face as she added thoughtfully, it's true that I've been having a lot of headaches lately. The girls took my blood pressure, and it's higher than normal. Molly did not hold back, despite William's presence. Mom, is it time for you to take a break? You should go to a resort near the sea and have a good rest. The head of the family, with unconcealed irony, exclaimed, dreams in you are weakness. Molly, do you believe in what you're suggesting? Who will let your mom go to this resort? I mean, she's indispensable. She's used to pulling the whole department. Daughter and mother exchanged understanding glances and did not enter into an argument. They knew that such verbal altercations most often end in a heated scandal with insults. Molly locked herself in her room, immersed in reading notes. She too decided to devote herself to medicine, as her mother, and studied at the third year of medical university. That momentous conversation in the kitchen was soon forgotten. Only later, when Mom was gone and the memory involuntarily surfaced moments that Molly had not given importance to before. Subsequently, the girl repeatedly chastised herself for inattention. The alarm beacon didn't work, and when her mother had to call an ambulance to the house, the woman's well-being deteriorated suddenly. She turned pale and grabbed the back of a chair. Daughter, I don't feel so good. Dial 03. The emergency team arrived just 5 minutes later. The doctor scolded Veta for not caring about her health, and then gave her an injection. After that, the mother felt much better. The head of the household was not at home at the time. Betty asked her daughter not to say anything to him. Daughter, your mother was just a little tired. So my blood pressure's skyrocketing. Tomorrow morning, I'll call the chief and take a couple of days off. But in the morning, the woman forgot her intention and flew to work. Molly tried to stop her. Mommy, you were really sick yesterday and you promised to stay home. Betty looked at her watch and answered on the run, daughter, let's talk about it later. I'm feeling pretty well today. Wednesday is my surgery day, so I can't just take a vacation. You're a medical student, so you should know that your duty to your patients is more important than a minor ailment. Molly was at a lecture when the cell phone in her jacket pocket. Seeing an unfamiliar number, she felt very anxious and asked to get off. An unfamiliar female voice and dryly informed Molly, Betty, I've gotten sick after surgery. She's in intensive care now. She's having a stroke. But don't worry. Our doctors will do everything they can. Without hearing the optimistic message, Molly, the head nurse of the environmental unit, ran to the hospital. She spent 3 days in front of the ICU doors, believing in the medic's prognosis. But despite the efforts of the best specialists, Betty passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 43 years old. Everything that followed was a blur. On the day of her mother's funeral, it was raining heavily, so the ceremony was held in a crumpled manner without any heartwarming speeches. After the cemetery, everyone went to the restaurant, where William decided to organize a wake. Molly refused to take part in this obligatory meal, which caused the anger of her father, and then she decided to stand out. Think what people will say if you don't show up at the wake. The girl replied in a colorless voice, I can't get my mom back anyway. I can't eat and drink and watch others fill their wombs. You see, I can't. William swore profanely, then said he didn't want to tell you on a day like this, but you asked for it. I'm sick of your antics, and I'm not going to put up with them from now on. Mother's gone. You can't count on me. The meaning of these parental words came to the girl later, when she discovered that the refrigerator was completely empty. When her father came home, she told him that they had nothing left but pasta. William looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time. Did you forget? I warned you that it's every man for himself now. How old are you? Is that right? Soon to be 20. Mature enough to earn your own food. Molly was stunned by her father's words. Dad, I have to get my diploma. Go ahead. I don't forbid you, but I don't intend to support you. The man hesitated for a few seconds, and then, looking directly at the girl, in the eyes said, Mother did not tell you. I didn't want to spoil family relations. The thing is, I'm not your father in the sense of biological connection. Your mom got pregnant by another man who left her. I married her out of pity. It was the second blow that completely broke the young girl. All night she cried at the window, no longer hoping for help. The next morning, Molly did not go to the university because she had to look for a livelihood. She spent several days looking for a suitable job, but found nothing. All the following days were like a terrible dream. Molly woke up in the morning and went to the kitchen to prepare some food from the leftovers, but she quickly ran out of pasta and cereals. There was nothing to satisfy her hunger. This black day just coincided with the day after the funeral of her mother, because she had no one to consult with. The girl went to the cemetery, where she spent the whole day until the evening. She went home only after an old woman who passed by shook her head in sadness. Grandfather by evening and go home. The deceased don't like to be disturbed at a time like this. Molly thanked the woman and left the cemetery. But another shock awaited her at home. As soon as she opened the apartment door, she saw a strange woman in the hallway wearing her mom's slippers on her feet. Molly's eyes went black, and she screamed, "Get out of here. Don't you dare touch my mom's things." The woman was frightened. From the kitchen came William's voice. "Molly, calm down. I warned you the other day that things would be different in this apartment now. In fact, although you are registered here, you have no rights to this apartment because you are not a blood relative." The man appeared in the hallway with a frying pan in his hands. "But I'm not chasing you away yet. Though things may change if you show your true self." Molly immediately arose. Edwards continued, "And now we can move on to introductions. This is Vanessa, my colleague. Please love and welcome. Dinner is almost ready. I hope you haven't forgotten that today is the 9th day. I haven't forgotten. I was at the cemetery." Molly wanted to refuse dinner, but hunger took over and she went to the kitchen. When Edwards graciously invited her to the table, she did not listen to what he was talking about with his colleague, because her thoughts were occupied with solving one question: how to go on living. After the final dinner, William went to see Vanessa off. Molly went to her room, the worries of the last days and her nervous system, and the girl felt incredibly tired. She did not notice how she fell into a heavy, restless sleep. It was then that she had her first dream. Molly's mother did not remember what the late mother said, but in the morning she felt relieved. It was as if she had recovered from a long illness. Another event happened that day that would later change her life. She decided to go out in the morning to look for a job. She was immediately lucky. At the bus stop, she noticed an advertisement that attracted her. A day caregiver for a paralyzed woman was needed. Molly tore off a piece of paper with a phone and immediately dialed the number listed there. She was answered by a young man. "Yes, we urgently need a caregiver, preferably with a medical degree. If you meet these 2 requirements, come on over." The man dictated her address and she was about to set off, but accidentally pushed the woman to wait at the bus stop for her bus. Molly hastily apologized, and at that moment she heard someone's voice. "This woman is about to back up and get hit by the bus. Help her." Before Molly knew it, the woman she had accidentally hit recently was rushing forward. But she didn't realize her strength. Molly managed to pick her up as she fell. The old lady was in shock. "I could have been hit by a car. Thank you, Molly. You saved me. Let me thank you." The woman went through her purse, but Molly absolutely refused to take her money. Good deeds don't require payment. "It's not nice that I helped you out of trouble." In high spirits, she went to the address, where she was met by the owner of a pleasant baritone. He helped Molly to take off her cloak, and only then held out his hand to Martin. Molly gave her name. The landlord led her deep into the apartment. "The 3 of us live in this big apartment. I have a purely female company, so it is me who has to solve all the problems. My grandmother Lola needs care. My mother and I not so long ago took her from the village, because there she was alone. But apparently, the change of residence did not go in favor of my grandmother. She decided to put us in order, but forgot about her age. As a result of a fall from a stepladder, she suffered a concussion. I don't know much about medicine, but after that injury, Grandma's legs gave out. Her hands are fine, and her speech is almost completely recovered, but she can't walk. Molly assured the young man I can handle it, although I do not have a diploma yet, but with the duties of a caregiver will not be a problem. I'm in my 3rd year of college, but at the moment I have a difficult life situation, so I had to leave the university for the time being. Martin listened attentively to the girl and suggested that Molly explain the reasons for your difficult situation. You don't have to, especially if you find it difficult to talk about it. Martin smiled and pointed to the door in front of which they had stopped. In this room is your future patient. Come in. Moore is looking forward to seeing his assistant. She's very sociable. Lola greeted Molly with a charming smile. What a cute little girl. I promise I won't be cranky and will do everything you tell me to do. My first day as a caregiver flew by. Martin's grandmother was not at all shy of the new person. She was happy to share her memories with Molly and generally acted as if she had known her for a long time. When Molly returned home, she remembered the day's incident at the bus stop and whispered in horror, "How did I not realize it was Mom's voice? Am I really going crazy?" Fear crept into Molly's heart, and she even thought about going to a specialist about the strange voices. But then she changed her mind. Basically, I don't mind the voices. And if I go to a psychiatrist, I may be placed in a closed institution. It's probably just a temporary disorder, and it appeared against the background of severe stress. The most important thing now is to be able to earn a living. With this optimistic thought, the girl fell asleep after the first working day. Soon Molly regained her former confidence and was happy to wake up in the morning. She hurried to her patient, and they spent the whole day talking. Martin met Molly in the morning and walked her to the bus stop in the evening. He didn't like to talk about himself. Only once he confessed to Grandma that I had wonderful children. But with my mother, we don't have a good relationship. She's always trying to impose things on me that contradict my principles. You know, when I was a child, I dreamed of becoming an adult as soon as possible, to get rid of my mother and their moralizing with Martin. Molly felt free and at ease. She noticed that the young man was also showing interest. Many times the girl caught his long gaze, and it is a mutual sympathy. It did not escape the keen eye. "Lola, you are such a handsome couple. I look at you and can't help but admire you. It's been a month." Molly's ward began to sit up with her help and then stood on her feet. The old woman considered her healing a miracle. "You got me back on my feet. I didn't believe I could walk anymore, but when you appeared, I felt strong. Just the touch of your hand helps." Molly, it was nice to hear the old lady say that, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Meanwhile, her relationship with Martin became more romantic. The young man began to give her flowers. Once he invited her to the movies. After the session, they walked along the waterfront, and Martin uncertainly suggested, "Molly, you could live with us? It would be more convenient for everyone." The girl doubted the correctness of such a decision. "How would your mom feel about it? Are you sure that she will like the constant presence of a stranger in the apartment?" "Honestly, I don't know. She's a very unpredictable person, and she's a little unpredictable." "Then don't make her angry. By the way, she's due back from a business trip any day now. It was her idea to hire a nurse for Grandma. I was totally against it at first, and now? Now I'm glad I listened to Mother. But that's probably the only positive example." Lissa showed up unannounced. Molly was in the bathroom when she heard strange footsteps in the hallway. She shouted loudly to Martin, "We're having a water treatment. Don't come in yet." But the door swung open. "Who's that? Who's making such a racket in here?" Lola answered. "Oh, the traveler's here, and she's not happy as usual. Or a black cat crossed your path on the way home." "Mom, are you always joking?" Lisa went into the room and kissed her mother. Lola was touched by his daughter's attention. "Martin and I have been waiting for you. He had to sit with me for almost 2 weeks, and then he came to us through an ad. This beautiful girl is here. Her name is Molly. She forgot we were going to hire a caregiver," the old lady mumbled. "Now I see who has a short memory." Although at first, Lisa had treated the young caregiver with ostentatious coolness. Over time, their relationship warmed. Martin's mother was particularly impressed by the fact that one day during dinner, Molly confidently told Lisa, "You should not put on pickles because you have diseased kidneys." If I'm not mistaken, The woman dropped the cutlery from her hands and stared at the girl. "How do you know about my kidneys?" Molly made an uncertain gesture with her hand, but she did not answer the question. She realized how her story would be received by the voice, but the hostess was struck by the girl's abilities. She wanted further proof. For this purpose, Lisa invited her friends. The woman even thought of a suitable reason to drink tea in pleasant company. Molly felt uncomfortable surrounded by status ladies and wanted to leave the room of the hostess. But Lisa asked her to. "Molly is scanning my girls. Tell me, what are their hidden ailments?" The girl was dumbfounded. "And I'll tell you later, well." She hurried to her ward's room and took a long time to come to her senses. The old woman noticed that the girl was distraught. "Molly, what's wrong? Or were you offended by a close call?" "No, everything is fine." Soon the hostess escorted the guests and looked into Lola's room. "Molly, I need to talk to you in confidence." The girl realized that Lisa would ask her for information about the hidden ailments of her friends. But there was nowhere to go. So she told her that one woman had no health problems, just a little nervous. "Second, in Molly's opinion, you should get a checkup right away. There's something wrong with her heart. There may be a congenital defect that hasn't been detected yet. It's been a few days. I meet Molly in the hallway in the morning, and the landlady mumbles, 'Yes, your prognosis has been confirmed.' There is indeed a hidden defect. That's just amazing. Tell me, how do you manage to see what doctors can't see?" The girl didn't know what to answer and only shrugged her shoulders. Martin's mother continued to express admiration for the girl's talent. "You can make money on it. Such practices are in trend today. Thank you, Lisa, for your advice. My plans do not include shamanism." The hostess shook her lips unhappily. "Don't be so sure. Maiden, don't you know what lies ahead? It is possible that your abilities will help you survive one day." Surprisingly, the woman's words proved prophetic. One day, Molly came home, but could not open the door of her apartment because the key did not want to enter the keyhole. The girl threw with irritation. "What nonsense," and squeezed the bell button with force. The door was opened by an old acquaintance, Vanessa. She also wrinkled her nose. "It's you, Molly. We decided to change the lock. There's a lot of shady people hanging around the entryway." The girl tried to mentally calm herself down, although inside the volcano was rolling without saying a word. She went to her room, but it was a shambles. Molly shouted, "What is this?" Edwards appeared from the bathroom. He wore his robe open, but he wasn't even embarrassed to see his stepdaughter. "Our gypsy has arrived." "What are we yelling?" Molly said. "My room. Why is it such a mess? And why did you change the lock?" William was pleased with the result of his actions, because he managed to break the resistance of this stubborn girl. He'd shown her who was boss in this apartment. Now it remains to enjoy his victory. The man gritted his teeth. "This is no longer your room. My wife Vanessa will now be in charge of this apartment." Molly felt her breath catching. She said in a low voice, "Daddy, how are you? After all, it's only been 3 months since Mom died." Edwards laughed in her face. "I don't care about convention, and don't call me Dad. I hope you're not so dumb that you don't realize you have nothing more to do in this apartment." Vanessa shifted her gaze fearfully from Molly to William. Her well-groomed face was contorted in a grimace of fear. At the peak of passion, Molly again heard her mother's voice, which predicted the impostor's doom. In a ringing voice, she said, "You rejoiced too soon. Mr. Edwards, it is written on your fate to be an eternal widower and your days. You'll end up in an asylum for the mentally ill. Get out of here, witch." William clenched his fists and moved on the girl, but Molly managed to get Yurka out through the open door. About an hour she wandered around the city and only then decided to call Magtip. The young man listened to her and firmly said, "Do not even think. Come to us." There was nowhere to go, and Molly accepted the young man's offer. She did not refuse Magtipu when he made her a marriage proposal. Soon the young people signed and life began to improve little by little. But despite her unique abilities, the girl did not know that the most difficult tests were ahead of her. Zach was cranky in the morning, so Molly was worried about the state of health of her son. Over these few years, she had learned not only to identify diseases almost without error, but also to select the most effective ways of healing. The young woman stretched out her hands and to the mother of little fancies, "Show me where you have a pain." The boy touched his forehead and hummed. Molly touched her lips to the baby's head. "Oh, I think we've forgiven it all a little bit because Zach doesn't listen to Mommy. When it's cold outside, you have to wear a hat. Don't you like hats? That's okay. Now Mommy will give you milk with honey and the cold will run away." The little boy asked in surprise. "It will run away and hide, like that aunt who came to see us yesterday." "Son, are you confused? No one came to our house yesterday." The boy was stubbornly insistent. "My aunt came, and I saw her from the window. She was hiding over there." The boy pointed to the barn. "I wanted to tell her it was wrong to peek, but I couldn't, because she ran away." Molly pulled her son close to her and smacked his hot forehead again. "You imagined all this because you're sick. Don't worry, we won't let anyone in with you." The boy echoed, "We won't let anyone in." The young mother went to the kitchen to prepare a warm drink for the child. But at that moment, a shadow flashed outside the window, and Zach shrieked, "Mommy, she's here again." Molly jumped outside and looked around. She clearly felt the presence of a stranger. Grabbing a pitchfork in her hands, the woman went to the barn. "Who's hiding in there? You better come out, or I might hurt unintentionally." For persuasiveness, Molly shook the pitchfork from the yellowed thickets and weeds. A woman's voice was heard. First, a woman's head emerged from the grass, then the observant fully marked out in space. Molly exclaimed, "Julia Jones, what are you doing here, and why are you hiding in my yard?" The young woman began to grow diligently. "Tied up the ringleaders. It's the elderly blades of grass wanted to see the witch doctor." Jacob led the space of the yard perplexed look. "And what's so interesting?" Uninvited guests desperately waved her hand. "I'm not interested in your houses. I wanted to look at the boy. Does he really look like my Sam?" "What are you talking about?" Molly realized that Lucy had spread the gossip around the village. She wasn't going to justify herself to that poor woman. A husband who never missed a woman's skirt. Jones continued to rub it in, and the witch doctor looked at her piercingly, minting every word. "My son has a father, and your Sam has nothing to do with his birth." Julia tried to object, but he came to see you several times. "How did you just move in with the woman of faith?" "That's right, but I'm not the one who treated your husband." "How can you blindly believe rumors like that? You're an educated woman, and it's not hard to calculate. When I moved here and when I had Zach, it didn't prove anything." Now doctors are nursing premature babies, Molly impatiently interrupted Julia. "My son was born overweight, so all your suspicions are unfounded." Chasing Lucy and other gossip. "Okay, Julia, I don't have time for this." But Jones wasn't going to leave. "Show me your boy, I want to make sure." This demand angered the young mother. "This isn't a circus or a museum to show off. My child is sick, and I'm not going to disturb him. Go home, Julia. Don't make me go to extreme measures." Jones reluctantly headed for the entrance. She turned around several times before leaving the stranger's yard. Molly noticed the woman's bloodless lips moving. She thought regretfully, "It must be clinging to me. And why are people willing to believe any word spoken? Why won't they trust the voice of reason?" After the bread drink, Zach felt better and fell asleep. Molly sat beside the crib, her son immersed in his thoughts. "My little boy, how like your father are you? But I don't want you to turn out to be a scoundrel like him." Molly's marital bliss lasted only 2 months. After their modest wedding with Martin unexpectedly died Lola, and her husband's mother drastically changed her attitude to the young daughter-in-law Lisa. She didn't hesitate to air her grievances with the girl. "It's your fault. Did not save my mommy from death. Left a soothsayer. You're a liar, not a healer." The woman usually made such accusations when Martin wasn't at home. She was afraid of her son's reaction and tried to keep her emotions in check. But everything changed after Martin went on a long business trip. Before he left, he reassured his young wife, Molly. "I'll be gone for a month or 2. Our company is opening a branch in the Sverdlovsk region, and my team will have to provide the technical part. But we have all experienced specialists who are real pros, so we'll manage." In a minimum of time, the young woman had a bad feeling and asked her husband, Martin, "Can't you stay? My heart is troubled." He hugged her affectionately. "Don't fill your head with bad thoughts. We'll be fine, and you can call me anytime." "I will. I'll take you at your word. I'll bore you with my calls every day." The very next day, she dialed her husband's number, but he didn't answer. For a whole week, the young woman tried to contact Martin, but heard only the soulless voice of the answering machine. Call her out. Call back later. Then she was told that such a number did not exist at all. She could only hope that Martin would call her himself. But as the days went by, her cell phone gave no sign of life except total incomprehension. What had happened to Martin? Worrying was her mother-in-law's attitude. She became irritable and rebuked her daughter-in-law for the slightest misstep. Subsequently, Martin's mother began to ignore her daughter-in-law's presence. As soon as Molly showed up in the kitchen, Lisa would defiantly leave, emphasizing with her behavior that she did not want to talk to her. This went on for about a week. Molly sensed that a storm was brewing, and she wasn't wrong. One evening, Lisa didn't come home in an agitated state, and from the doorstep began to shout, "Molly, where are you? Come here. There is a serious conversation." The girl had to obey her mother-in-law's demand. She went out into the hallway and immediately smelled the odor of booze. This fact shocked the girl, because Lisa was very careful about her health. She always refused wine, even on holidays. Noticing that the daughter-in-law wrinkled Mother Martin, critically remarked that she did not like it. "I don't like a lot of things either, but I have to put up with it. For example, your presence in this house pisses me off. Tell me how long you're going to sit here waiting for who knows what." "Lisa, why are you doing this?" "I'm waiting for Martin. He's my lawfully wedded husband." The woman burst out laughing. "He had a platoon of wives like that before him. Do you really believe in fairy tales? My son is not your type. That's not the kind of wife he wants. Let him decide what kind of wife he wants." The mother-in-law came so close that the girl felt her breath on her face. "Listen to me, beautiful. Has it not yet reached your native brains that Martin regrets his hasty wife, and that's why he doesn't answer you? By the way, he called me the day before yesterday. Told me he's gonna be delayed another month." Molly held her breath. "Lisa, he asked about me." "He did. He wondered if you'd moved out of this apartment yet. I'd really like to hear the answer to that question too, because your presence in this house really annoys me. What are you here for, anyway? Your services are not needed. And if you're going to live on someone else's dime, that's not gonna work. So find an apartment. And the sooner you do it, the better. I'll even give you some money. Given your hopeless situation, go to your relatives. After all, you have aunties and grandmothers." Lisa took out 2 bills of the highest denomination. "I hope you and I understand each other." There was a hammer pounding in her head, and the sound made her very dizzy. Molly began to hastily gather her things. Before her eyes flashed the face of her mother-in-law, distorted with hatred, and in her ears those nasty dots. Her words sounded, "Look for an apartment. That's not the kind of wife my son needs." Martin called to me, smearing tears and despair on her cheeks. A young woman whispered to her, "He called me because he was afraid, and I was such a knave fool. I wanted to make them happy with the news that we were having a baby." Molly had only recently found out she was pregnant, but she had been hesitant to tell her mother-in-law. "It's okay. I'll be fine on my own. We don't need anyone." In that critical situation, she felt for the first time united with her unborn child. Trying not to make any noise, she left her husband's apartment and headed for the train station. She already knew that she would buy a ticket to Native Village. Wendy wouldn't chase me away. I have nowhere else to go. Just the day after Molly arrived at the village across the creek, news spread throughout the neighborhood that a distant relative had settled in. Wendy treated people with herbs, but she selected the formulas based solely on the complaints of visitors. The old lady's granddaughter had different diagnostic methods. Molly could identify a diseased organ with a touch of her hand. Over time, she learned to control her unique abilities and the accuracy of her diagnosis. Amazed even medics, who sometimes turned to her for help. But the popularity of the young witch doctor did not many became across the throat. Questionable activities of a young woman attracted the attention and representatives of law enforcement. One day, Molly visited the district police officer and advised you to get a job, because people are different. They say I have no complaints against you. Live as you like, but I have to respond to complaints. Go to the poultry farm. There's always a shortage of labor there. Molly thanked the district officer for his advice and was soon on the payroll. While Wendy was alive, she worked in shifts. But after the death of a relative, the question of where to put the child came up. And here again, kind people helped. The company allocated a place in a kindergarten for a single mom. It remained only to rejoice in life. Envious, ill-wishers have already hatched a plan of revenge, strangers who dared to break the established order in their promised corner. No sooner had Julia Jones left the house, the healer, as she noticed not in the distance painfully familiar male figure out of rage. The woman whispered, "Oh, you ghastly," to this Vedi me poured, "but nothing, I'll arrange you." Love comforts together will be on a hot griddle tumbling, trying not to give away his presence. My jealousy is unbearable. Woman sneaked into her house. The children rushed to her with questions. "Mom, where have you been? Dad came to ask for you, and we don't know what to say." Julia automatically asked her daughter, "And where is Daddy now?" "Where is he?" "He went to work. He just left without waiting for you. His car broke down. It needs to be repaired. I made him some sandwiches because Daddy said he'd be late." The woman listened to her daughter, and in her head a plan of revenge was already brewing. She muttered, "It's a good thing Daddy will be back late." The daughter looked at her mother in surprise. "Mom, you seem strange today. You're scolding Daddy for being in the workshops all day, but you're saying it's a good thing." Julia whispered at her daughter and went about her chores. She could hardly wait until evening when it was quite dark. The woman slipped out of the house. She brought her bag with her, which she tried to carry very carefully. She stepped carefully past the neighbors' houses and disappeared into the night. All day long, Molly had not gotten the visits of Julia Jones out of her mind either. "I still don't understand why that woman came. And she was behaving strangely. Can jealousy turn a mother of two into such a hunted creature? It's just an unsubstantiated rumor. I've only seen that Sam a few times, and that was in public after dinner. A woman was about to do laundry, but the old lady next door came in. 'Molly, baby, look at my leg. You've got eyes like x-rays.' The old woman was leaning on a crooked branch and barely had a ferret, so she sat her down on a stool. 'And where did you get it?' The old woman began to wail. She's getting old. Her eyes are failing. She was doing her chores at home. Dana hit a corner. It hurts like hell. I wish it wasn't broken. I'd be dead." Kelly, like many old people in the village, had no relatives. Well, they had relatives, but they lived far away. Therefore, any illness, or even a minor injury for such people seemed a disaster. The healer tried to calm the grandmother. "You still live to 100 years. You don't have a fracture, but you were wrong. I'm going to give you a little treatment." Molly took a jar of herbal ointment out of the cupboard and applied the composition liberally to the bruised long areas. Then she put a bandage on her leg. "That's it. You'll feel better soon." Kelly began to thank the woman. "You have a good heart to help people. God bless you." The old woman took a jar of ointment and, leaning on a stick, headed for the entrance. "Kelly, let me walk you out." Molly drove her patient almost to the house and then returned. Until late in the afternoon, she did her housework. The uneasiness that had appeared in the afternoon did not go away. This unpleasant feeling only grew stronger by the minute, and the woman tried to understand the reason for its appearance, but her thoughts each time returned to the morning incident. She put Zach to bed and was about to go to bed herself. Suddenly, the image of her mother appeared very clearly before her eyes. "Don't sleep, daughter. You can't sleep." Molly ran her hands over her face, as if trying to remove the obsession, but it didn't help. Then the woman went to the window. She wanted to open the window a little to let in some fresh air, but at that moment, a column of flame erupted from the side. Not yet realizing what had happened, the young woman rushed to the crib. She managed to jump out into the street when Baba Faith's flimsy house was completely engulfed in flames. Zach cradled her mother's skinny body. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Don't be afraid, son, I'm with you." Instead of fire people ran away, but mostly it was old people who couldn't help. When the firemen arrived, the home village was just a smoking ruin. Molly stood at a loss, not knowing what to do. Elderly Gawkers had already managed to scatter to their homes, and no one cared about the young mother with a baby in her arms. She tucked her son into the blanket and wandered off to meet the dispersing. Mused dawned. Jacob disliked night duty to the point of toothache, but he disliked middle-of-the-night calls even more. This night, he wasn't destined to enjoy pleasant visions either. Because in the morning, the phone was ringing off the hook. It was the duty nurse from the emergency room. "Jacob, urgently need your consultation." Jacob grumbled unhappily. "Is something burning?" "You couldn't wait until morning." The girl grinned. "There was a fire today, but not at our place. Someone's house burned down across the river, but there were no casualties." "Who'd want to come in the middle of the night?" "A woman from around here. It's a bad situation with her arm." "All right, I'll be right there. Get a small or ready just in case." "I'm all set." I could hear a woman crying on the phone. Jacob said in his heart, "They take it to the extreme and then they cry." What kind of people? The man quickly dressed and jumped outside. The morning fog completely enveloped the small town. The sight was stunning, but Jacob had no time to admire the beautiful scenery. Duty was calling him. He hurried towards the hospital, not expecting to meet anyone on the deserted street. Suddenly he noticed in the square near the hospital an incomprehensible movement. At first, Jacob wanted to run past this suspicious object, but heard a child crying. The man thought with irritation that people can't sleep. They're dragging children with them. He came closer and only then realized that the object of his concern was a young woman with a baby in her arms. Jacob asked if you were in trouble. The voice replied yes. "Our house burned down and my son and I are now left on the street." Jacob remembered the conversation with the nurse from the emergency room. "So you're the burned out people from across the river? Do you have any acquaintances or relatives?" "No one, and everything burned down." "I didn't even have time to bring my papers." "What am I going to do with you?" "I don't have time to arrange anything for you." The man thought for a second, but then he exclaimed happily, "I don't remember your name." "Sweet young lady, but here's a solution to your problem. I'll give you the keys to the house where I live. It's not far from here, near the store. You'll wait for me. Then we'll figure out what to do together. Unfortunately, I can't spare your time right now because I'm in a hurry to go to surgery." Jacob gave the young woman the keys and headed toward the hospital. Lucy sat on the couch in the emergency room and rocked her growing arm like a child. The woman's condition was worsening by the hour, and the swelling had spread all the way to her shoulder. Lucy was crying her eyes out. "Why didn't I listen? She told me the day before yesterday to run to the hospital, and I didn't listen. Now I'm gonna die." In the prime of life, Jacob heard the last words of the woman and cheerfully said, "Do not even dream. We will not let you die. We will save you now." Lucy tried to rise from the couch, but the wild pain nailed her to the seat. "I'm not the one who can't stand my hanging cats anymore. You're the one who's going to cut my arm." Jacob patted the woman on the shoulder. "We'll look at your arm first, and then decide what to do. Cutting something off isn't a problem, so we'll figure out how to avoid losing it. Hey guys, help a woman to the dressing room." This request was addressed to the duty shift of the emergency room. A young nurse together with an orderly picked up Lucy from both sides, and the patient began to wail even louder. "Why didn't I listen? She warned me." Jacob inquired, "You're always talking about some kind of witch doctor. If I understand you correctly, you have been treated with folk methods before." "No doctor didn't. I had that damn splinter in me over 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine. And then my palm started to swell up and I couldn't save it. I went to a witch doctor across the river. She lives as a nurse," interrupted a patient. "Jenya has a house. Bauki faith this night burned down." Lucy, the palm of her healthy hand covered her mouth. "My mother is a woman." Apparently put down the young witch doctor. "Jacob is already a little accustomed to the local lingo, and you have suspicions about it?" Lucy shook his head. "Maybe I do, but I won't." "Why are you slandering people for nothing?" The nurse noticed. "You be right. I have never believed in all sorts of things, and I have never gone to a witch doctor. It's safer and safer to go to a certified specialist. Jacob looked at the girl carefully. You're wrong. You can't deny the possibility of unconventional practices. I too, in my youth, I thought all this quackery, but then myself got into trouble and saved me a local uncle with a tambourine Jacob and removed from the hand Lucy and bandage and shook his head. Oh, you got your arm all messed up. We'll have to operate. Having calmed down, it was. Lucy started wailing loudly again. Doctor, I can't bear the pain. I assure you, you won't even feel it, because we'll give you an injection. Within an hour, the operation was over. Am I alive, or am I dreaming? Jacob was cheering up the patient. It's okay, and you're still on the ground. But you're going to have to stay with us for a few days because there could be complications. We're treating you. Then you'll go home, a promise that soothed the pain-stricken woman. I'd do anything to save my arm. The nurse on duty began to register the patient for inpatient treatment. Jacob looked at his watch. Wow, it's 8:30. Time to go to work. The surgeon was already heading to his department, but suddenly remembered about the girl who had the keys to the house. He asked the nurse, "If you don't mind, tell mine that I'll be a little late for half an hour, no more." Of course, Jacob will run home. Have some tea after such a restless night. It is not a sin to rest. Jacob hurried home because he didn't like to be late for work. He didn't consider night duty an excuse and hoped to be home in time for the general hospital meeting. The door of the house was open, and the man, trying not to make any noise, made his way into the large room. His guests were asleep on the couch, and he was able to get a good look at their facial features. A young woman suddenly gleamed something, and the man shifted his gaze to the nightstand and was stunned. He saw the woman's jewelry, a small pendant in the form of a locket. There was no way this thing was in this girl's possession. Jacob touched the young woman's hand, and Molly opened her eyes with difficulty. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. The man had already completely mastered himself, and I just want to ask you one question. Tell me, where did you get this pendant? The girl said sadly, it was my mother's jewelry. It's the only thing I have in memory of her. Jacob felt his mouth dry with excitement in his voice. He asked your mom's name by chance, Betty. The girl fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Yes, Edward's Betty. He couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. Edwards. So it was you. So she tricked me then. But why? Molly looked fearfully at the man, who had his arms wrapped around his head in despair. She did not understand anything, but was afraid to question this man. Terrible fear for herself and her son again. Sticky paws touched her heart. Perhaps we better leave. Molly began to wake her son. Zach, wake up, sweetheart. Jacob sank down on the couch without strength. Oh, you have to leave? My daughter, stay here. This is your home now. I have so much to tell you, but I have to get my thoughts together. Jacob had completely forgotten his duty as a doctor. He sat on the couch and could not take his eyes off the night guest who had come into his life so unexpectedly. Zach looked at the adults and didn't understand what was happening to them. He looked at his mother, then at the owner of the house. You're my grandfather. The stupor fell away. And Jacob confidently answered, yes, little boy. He cradled the boy against him and clutched him. Eyes too stingy male tears rolled down his cheeks. But Jacob was not embarrassed by these tears because they were tears of happiness. Episodes from the past often surfaced in Jacob's mind. But for more than a quarter of a century, he had diligently banished them. Once he had already drawn the final line beyond which his past remained, and he never wanted to go back there again. But the appearance of a young witch doctor with a baby made the man change his principles, and for the first time in many years he allowed himself to return to the place where his youthful dreams and first love remained. With William Edwards. They had been friends since first grade, and this friendship was approved by both boys' parents and teachers. Because Jacob possessed the qualities of a leader, and William tried to imitate him in everything, so their relationship often resembled a competition. But until the time of endless dueling did not tolerate serious disagreements. Only sometimes William would wistfully remark, Jacob, you're a real lucky man. No matter how hard I try, I can't do it. His comrade answered him everything, because you try to repeat after others, showing your individual qualities, and immediately feel different. Jacob tried to follow his friend's advice, but he still did not succeed. Around the 9th grade, he decided to succeed in another way. He started spreading rumors about him behind his friend's back. When Jacob realized who was the source of the gossip, he gave his friend his first warning. "Look, William, this is not manly. If it happens again, you can forget you have a friend." Edwards was quiet for a while, but jealousy lurked beneath the boy's heart. Despite the fact that relations between friends cooled a little, William also applied to medical school. Surprisingly, but both guys got in at the first go. Jacob took the event with reserve. Edwards, on the other hand, was triumphant. "You and I are destined to be together for life. I can already imagine how you and I will become surgeons and work in a good clinic." Jacob decided to tease his comrade, but district hospitals are not a prospect for an aspiring doctor. "Edwards, I don't get it." Jokes waved 2 hands, did not get burned at once. "This is definitely not for me. My daddy won't let his only son miss out somewhere in the middle of nowhere." Jacob, in a constructive tone, said a real doctor must go through all the stages of formation. Only then can he become a true professional. Although William disagreed, he did not argue with his comrade. The silent man swallowed his resentment when Jacob, not him, had been elected the head of the group at the general meeting. The appearance of a favorite girl in the life of a friend's friend was the most stressful for the jealous. Betty was getting a lot of attention from a lot of guys, but she only let herself be courted by Jacob. William secretly suffered because he also liked this girl. After Jacob started dating Betty, and Jacob was basically left out. Then he remembered the old and already personally proven method of gossip. But having learned from bitter experience, the boy was now acting smarter. He acted very carefully and mostly through third parties. Therefore, it was almost impossible to identify the source. Thanks to the efforts of William at the university, spread rumors that Jacob likes to drink and booze. Such behavior of the university administration could not leave without attention. Jacob was summoned to the dean's office and reprimanded in full form. He was given a warning. "Keep in mind, Jacob, one more such signal, and you can take away your documents." No matter how much the guy tried to slander, to justify himself, no one wanted to listen to him, although he guessed who was the culprit of his troubles. There was no proof. In order to completely eliminate problems in the future, Jacob terminated all relations with Edwards. He even rented a room so that he wouldn't have to face the envious students in the dormitory. But William was not deterred. He decided to come in from the other flank, namely to make his accomplices and his friend's girlfriend. But Betty quickly figured him out. "Look, William, you've got the wrong girl. I'm used to believing only the facts, so you're not going to get away with this. Don't waste your time. Do something useful. Take up ballroom dancing or go to the library." No girl had ever humiliated William in such a way, but the narcissistic young man didn't know how to take revenge on those who made him suffer. The opportunity came unexpectedly, approached the end of studies, and every future medic made plans for life. Before receiving their diplomas, the graduates were offered a little work in the organization of the Red Cross. The first to sign up was Edwards. He excitedly told his classmates about the prospects of participating in the mission. "Guys, this is a great launching pad." A knowledgeable person assured me that later all participants would be given special certificates. And in general, to visit abroad for free. It's the limit of dreams. Many alumni took the bait. Jacob was one of them. Only he had a very different agenda. He thought the peacekeeping mission would give him a chance to gain useful experience as an aspiring surgeon. When Betty found out Jacob was going to Africa, she was shocked. "Jacob, do you realize how serious this is? It's very dangerous. Boyfriend to girlfriend. He won't send us somewhere too hot. I've already found out our group is going to one of the poorest countries. We'll take vaccines and necessary medical supplies there to provide medical care to the people. As soon as I get back, you and I will definitely cut the wedding short. Why didn't you tell me before? I would have gone with you too. There's nothing for girls to do there. So there's still danger, and you're lying to me. Betty, you know there's danger everywhere. Even crossing the road is scary because not everyone follows the rules. There were 17 people in their group, and they put Edwards in charge. This was William's finest hour. He gave out commands left and right, which caused laughter and obscene jokes. Upon arrival at their destination, the future doctors immediately began to work Jacob, and 2 other guys were sent to remote settlements. But they did not reach the place. On the way to the settlement, they were ambushed. 1 guy was killed, and Jacob was seriously wounded. All the valuable cargo was taken by local bandits. They also tied up the 3rd boy and took him with them. Scraps of their conversations, Jacob realized that the bandits were going to get a ransom for the prisoner. That terrible day he remembered for the rest of his life. He was bleeding on the road with no hope of rescue. Gathering his last strength, Jacob gave himself first aid, which helped to stop the bleeding. After that, he lost consciousness. He woke up in a dwelling resembling a tent. People were discussing quietly and pointing at him. Soon a short man in brightly colored rags jumped up. He began to examine Jacob's wound and at the same time loudly faltered his tongue. The boy realized that his affairs were not good at all. After examining the local shaman, Jacob ate some potions, and he fell into unconsciousness. He lost track of the days, so he did not know how much time had passed since his disappearance. When he became quite well, 2 men from the tribe put him on some kind of battery and took him to the nearest town. There he learned that he had been a guest of the local tribe for 3 whole months. He was also told that he had been presumed dead for all those months. It was a real shock. Jacob was afraid to even imagine the upcoming meeting with his fiancée. But everything turned out to be obscenely trivial. Betty did not faint, but only slightly pale. And then the most amazing thing happened. His fiancée was not happy, but on the contrary, began to reproach him that he had not found a way to inform her that he was alive and well. "And I believed you, and you turned out to be like this." She didn't get a chance to say who he really was, because the final scene was the appearance of William Edwards. Jacob pulled his eyes out. "What are you doing here?" William gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I'm glad you're alive. Honestly, very glad. But sorry, old boy, things have changed while you've been traveling in Africa. Betty and I got married last week. It was a beautiful wedding. Too bad you didn't get a chance to have any fun." Jacob didn't remember how he got to the apartment he and Betty had rented before the upcoming wedding. His thoughts were all jumbled up in his head, and at that moment, he wanted more than anything to drink himself into unconsciousness. The only person who was willing to give him a shoulder to lean on was Andrew. "Hang in there, Jacob. You are a man and must be ready for any trials." The next day, Jacob left town, where his first love and his dashed hopes for happiness remained. Molly looked at the man who was telling her such incredible things. "I gave this pendant to your mother after our first serious, if I may say so, meeting. The only thing I don't understand is, why didn't she tell me?" Molly shook her head. "What makes you so sure I'm not William's daughter?" Jacob found the strength to laugh. "I'll show you one picture now, and you'll understand everything yourself." He put Zach, who had already climbed into his lap, on the floor and opened the closet. He searched for something for a long time, finally handed her the picture. Zach looked in and smiled. "You poked your finger and said, 'That's me, Mom,' when we took the picture. And that's the jacket I don't remember." Molly was afraid to believe it. She could feel the tears coming out of her eyes. "So we are not alone in this world, that we have someone else." Jacob smiled. "Not just anyone, my father and grandfather. By the way, quite a successful surgeon at your hospital." Molly looked at him confused. "What are we all going to do now?" Jacob looked at his watch. "So that's how I'm going to work. I'm sorry to leave you, but now we'll definitely have time to talk. Then I'll take some time off, and we'll be sure to get back to the paperwork and the fire investigation. Anything you can find here is at your disposal. You don't miss me, do you? I'll try to get out in time." He moved toward the door, then stopped, smiled. "I have a very strange feeling right now. I'm basically all alone in this world already, and now I have a family. It's so unusual, so strange, but very joyful." Jacob came out Molly, spinning around the house and holding Zach in her arms. "Zach, we have a daddy, and you have a grandfather. You know, he didn't leave anyone behind. It was all this one." Molly furrowed her brow. She already knew that William's new wife had been hit by a car, and now her ex-father was grooming a new woman. But nothing, as long as the rope didn't twist. That voice forced. Molly grinned. Her mom had never fooled her. By some coincidence. In the afternoon, the chief of the local police department had been admitted with a trivial appendicitis. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Jacob asked, "Why are you so nervous?" "By virtue of your profession, it seems to me that you have come face to face with criminals more than once." The man grinned unhappily. "Jacob, I know what to expect from a criminal. I can anticipate what's going to happen. But I'll be sleeping here, if I understand correctly. So I won't be able to influence the course of events." Jacob looked at him with interest. "That's an interesting point of view, but you can't be so distrustful of those around you. Maybe that's what I learned there." Jacob immediately understood what the man was talking about. "But if you have more trust." "I was there too, but not for long. Our supply train was ambushed. One doctor was killed. I was badly wounded, so the bandits assumed I was dead. But they took one young doctor kid with them. I guess they wanted a ransom. I never found out anything about him. They just told me not to go where I didn't want to go." The chief of police held out his hand. "Leo, believe it or not, but I feel a lot better now. I trust you." The operation went quickly and without complications. 2 hours later, Leo woke up in his room. His consciousness was still hazy, but he could hear someone talking not far from him. "Leo, the jokes are over. You were saved this time, but the next ones might not make it. Leo's in the room with you now. As soon as he feels better, I'll be sure to ask him to send you for treatment." "What are you talking about? I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a free man." At the same second, there was a slap, and a man's voice said, "Oh, I'm Leo. I'm telling you quite seriously." Leo grinned to himself. Wow, they're already scaring grown men with it. When breathing became easier, and he could even get out of bed, Leo called his old friend. "I have a case. Remember that medical supply wagon that was ambushed? A man from that convoy operated on me yesterday. I realize that the case is long closed, but I remember you talking about wanting to dig privately." The police chief listened for about 5 minutes, then nodded his head. "It's a deal. Call me to meet you." Jacob first wanted to run home, but then realized that you cannot come empty-handed to his grandson, or his daughter either. This is all so unusual. Grandson, daughter. Even the language. Even his brain was cautiously saying these words, as if afraid that everything would turn out to be untrue. He drove to the largest mall in the city. Jacob quietly opened the door of the house. Who knows, maybe Zach is asleep. But no, Zach was not only awake. He seemed to be waiting for him, because he immediately rushed over to him. Jacob threw all the bags on the floor and picked up his grandson, who clung to him trustingly. Molly looked around at the purchases. "Oh, did you guys clean out the store? Let's make a deal. No kick out. I realize it's hard for you to call me Dad right away, but I hope that moment will come someday." Molly nodded her head in embarrassment. "I'll try." Jacob set Zach on the floor and commanded, "Let's take it apart. I hope I got the dimensions right." Molly shook her head. "Dinner first. Everything else later." Zach had eaten everything the fastest and was now looking longingly at the brightly colored box that peeked out from the pile of bags. There was obviously something very interesting in there, and obviously for him. Molly smiled as she looked at her son. She understood what he was going through. "Thank you, Molly. I can't remember the last time I had anything other than sandwiches and wheat when I got home from work." "Well, now it's on." Jacob sat on the couch and watched Zach's already calm demeanor. The big machine. The kid's eyes were burning. He hadn't parted with it all evening and then into bed. Molly had barely taken the machine out of his hands when he was already asleep. Jacob was drinking coffee, waiting for his daughter. They had so much to discuss. Molly had just entered the room when there was a knock on the door. Jacob wondered what it was like to be brought in at this hour. He usually got a call from the hospital. Standing on the doorstep was a grim Sam Jones. Molly immediately frowned. Why did he come to apologize? "You fool, she told me everything. She's crying to me. She's afraid that she'll go to jail, but she won't. Molly turned away, signaling that the conversation was over. But Sam wasn't going to leave. He sat down on a chair and spoke. "I don't know how I'm going to live my life, and my jealousy. I would have left a long time ago, but this way she'll take it out on the kids." Molly turned to him. "Is it your fault she's so jealous of you?" Sam raised his head at her. "But I didn't do anything wrong." "Yes, you did. You just don't notice it. But she does, and she sees that you're worse off at home than you are at work. Think about what I said if you want to keep your family together." Sam sat for another 5 minutes, then got up, put a thick wad of money on the table. "Molly, no offense to you. I realize you can't buy a house with this money, but you're all out of stuff." Sam left, and Jacob looked at his daughter in surprise. "And I don't understand everything now. Did he set your house on fire?" "No. His wife is our village gossip. So we should go to the police." "No need to go to the police. She's already punished herself. It's not her fault. She's just stupid and listens to nonsense." Jacob shook his head. "You are just like your mother, always for justice, for good justice. Tell me how you ended up in the village. It's a long story of a lifetime." Molly poured herself some tea and sat down in front of her father. They talked half the night. Jacob was indignant several times and said he should be nailed. First it was William and then Martin. Looking at his watch, Jacob said 2 hours and go to bed. "I'll stay up a little longer." He went outside, breathing in more air. If things hadn't worked out this way then and now, things would be different. Leo, having learned what problems Jacob has in the family, immediately said, "Today, go to the office. They will take care of your documents. I'll call. Everything will be done quickly, in a week." Molly looked at the new passport with a smile. "Well, it's a thing to celebrate. I have to work tomorrow. I'm out of vacation time." Molly began to set the table. But then there was a knock at the door. "Yes, come in." On the doorstep stood a strange man a little older than Jacob. There was something about the man's gaze that was so forgotten yet familiar. "Good evening. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm a friend of Leo's. I very much like to talk to you, Jacob." "Well, come in." "No, if you don't mind, let's go for a walk. Your daughter doesn't need to hear our conversation." Jacob looked at Molly confused, but put on his jacket. They got out and walked to the river. "The thing is, the guy who was taken prisoner is a very good friend of mine. You know, there were so many investigations, but nobody dug up anything. I'm retired from the force, but now I'm in private practice, and I can afford to get back into the business when Jacob came back." Molly looked at him questioningly. "He only said that. It's about our service. And William, he was there too, wasn't he? But to be honest, I was hurt right away. I was treated by a shaman for a long time, so I don't really know anything. And I don't want to. I'm gonna have to go back to those times again. I feel it." The next day, Molly and Zach went to the local store. As luck would have it, Lucy was in the store at the time. Zach, as soon as he saw her, clung to his mother. And Lucy, who was just about to leave, dropped her bag on the floor. "Oh, who's come to the store? Not like for food. What about frogs, whose legs and all?" She laughed at her own joke. Molly let go of her son's hand and moved in on her. "Why do you have so much venom in you? Don't you realize you're poisoning yourself with it? Julia's been spilling all kinds of shit. And now she's going to jail. And if we were asleep, what sin would be on your soul?" Lucy retreated fearfully. "What are you waiting for?" "That I didn't do anything. In fact, I can say what I want to say, and who to believe and what to do is everyone's business." Lucy picked up her bag and headed for the door. Molly just said, "Are you watching what you say? You're sick with anger and venom." Lucy jumped outside, and already from there her threats and curses were heard. Molly smiled sweetly and turned to the saleswoman. Now Molly felt neither fear nor loneliness. She directly physically felt that she had protection behind her. Her father. The clerk looked at Molly fearfully. Their store was on the outskirts of town. You could say it was the end of the town, so everyone knew each other. She'd heard about Molly, too. That evening, her father said to Molly, "I need to go to my hometown. Would you like to buy something?" Molly thought it would be a good idea to go out. Zach had prepared for the trip extensively. Molly and Jacob almost died laughing. When you saw the backpack he packed, no, Zach, that's no good. We can't take that much stuff for him. Zach's right behind the sniffles. But I need all this stuff. Jacob sat down in front of him. Well, then we won't be able to buy you anything, because we'll have nowhere to put it. The boy thought for a moment, then quickly began to free his backpack. At the train station, they were met by the same man who had once come to them. Jacob, I will say at once that your story helped me a lot. Some facts became a real missing link. Unfortunately, a friend of mine was killed when he was captured and ransomed. He escaped, but he died in the escape. Now we know who it was that set the enemies upon your wagon. Jacob stretched thoughtfully, so I thought they were waiting for us there for a reason. No, not for nothing. This is a man you know well. And Jacob stared at the man in surprise. You are. This is your boyhood friend, William Edwards. No, it can't be. Yes, he's not a very nice man, but what would it be? There was a lot of money at stake. Jacob, I realized that now the puzzle is finally coming together. And if it was William, then everything was falling into place. An hour later, they were leaving the investigative committee, where Jacob and William had a confrontation. William was crying tears, apologizing to Jacob and Molly. The man caught up with them on the street, handed Molly the keys. Take these keys to the apartment. Are you still registered there? He won't need them for the next 10 years. They were silent for a while. Then Jacob decisively said, let's go to a cafe or a restaurant. We should celebrate. They sat down at a table by the window. Molly smiled because Zach was asking 1,000 questions. Why here? As in a fairy tale. Molly. The young woman flinched, looked up and saw Martin. Zach immediately felt his mother tense up, pressed himself against her and froze, looking at the stranger. Martin looked at his wife with surprise. Of course, the formerly beloved wife. Strange, had she then exchanged him for this man who was old enough to be her father? And this child, judging by its age, she'd gotten pregnant as soon as she'd run away from him. Martin was still grateful to his mother for being able to open his eyes. True, he hadn't married again yet, despite his mother's best efforts. Hello, Martin. She wanted to hide so she wouldn't see the traitor's face. She didn't know or understand how she felt about this man, but she knew she didn't want to see him. How are you doing, Molly? Martin looked mockingly at Jacob. I guess that's what happiness is to you. I am happy, Martin. I hope you're not suffering in your happy life, too. What kind of hypocrites are you? I believed you were pure, that you love me. Molly raised her eyebrows in surprise. Then she stood up. You're the one calling me, you hypocrite. You've gone off to have fun. You couldn't even tell me yourself that you were fed up with me and asked your mother to kick me out. And then you call me a hypocrite. Martin even took a step back under Molly's pressure. Kicked you out where? What are you talking about? You just decided to justify yourself. She turned around and sat back down. Martin wanted to say something else, but Jacob stood in front of him, a young man. Would you please leave us? My daughter doesn't want to talk to you, and my grandson is afraid of you. Martin cast one last glance at Lisa and quickly moved toward the exit. Now he wanted to get to his mother and ask some questions. Molly was silent for a long time, then raised her eyes to Jacob. He asked, I take it that this is Zach's father. Yes, Dad. I've seen his face somewhere, but I can't remember. He's a biochemist. He seems pretty good. Maybe even accomplished something. Jacob slapped himself on the forehead. That's right. I read his article. I thought he was very knowledgeable. Meanwhile, Martin was carrying everything back to his mother after Molly left him. He came back and moved out on Mom. True, she was adamantly opposed to it, but that didn't bother him much. He'd rather have her bothering him about nothing. But it was unbearable to live with her. Mom. Lisa came out of the room. Martin, why are you screaming like a victim? Mom, we need to talk. What we need to talk about. What could be so important? That you went to visit your mother and saw Molly. The woman shuddered, then quite indifferently said, I'm glad, and I had nothing to do with it. Mother, tell me how Molly left me. And who she left with. Lisa jerked her shoulder. God, I've got nothing better to do. Only how to keep in your head such nonsense will you run. Martin stood in front of his mother. "Mom, the jokes are over. I saw Molly, I saw her son, who could be my age. She doesn't have a wedding ring, she doesn't look like a walking woman. Which makes me think you have something to tell me." Lisa. Somehow she looked at her son at once. She had never seen him in such a state. Jacob and his family returned home in the late afternoon. The day had been so full that Zach had long since fallen asleep in his grandfather's arms. "Molly, you go to bed. I'm on duty tomorrow too." "Yes, Dad, you go. I'll do all the work here myself." Molly looked at the shopping pile. Zach's grandfather's budget had been shaken up pretty badly today. He didn't ask for anything, by the way, just stared with huge eyes at anything. And Grandpa's already running out to buy it. It's time to go back to work at the daycare center. There was a quiet knock on the window. Molly looked out and saw Julia, the same one who had set her house on fire. Sighing, she threw on her sweater and went outside. Julia immediately threw herself at her feet. "Molly, I'm so sorry. I don't know how it all happened. As if someone was pushing me. I've done something that I don't know how to live." Sam is embarrassing to look at in front of the kids. "Calm down, you're rereading. No one died at the funeral. And that's already good." Julia sat down on the step. "How to live? How to live now?" Molly sat down next to her, usually to live. "Forget everything that happened and start over." "Start how?" "Yeah, Sam won't forgive me. And neither will you. I forgave you a long time ago. I'm grateful in some ways. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have found my father." Julia looked at her in amazement. "The new surgeon is your father?" Yes, Molly was well aware that tomorrow the whole small town would know about it. But she decided to go with it. They'd find out sooner or later anyway, so let it be sooner so there would be less gossip. Molly turned around. Sam was standing at the door. Julia jumped up. "Sam, what are you doing here?" He looked at his wife gloomily. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize." Sam's voice softened a little. He came in, sat down on the porch. "I bought a trip to the sea. In 3 days we'll go as a family." Julia froze. Molly smiled. She had underestimated Sam. He appeared to have hurt her. Sam at sea altogether. They walked tightly holding hands. Molly sat still for a long time, looking up at the sky and smiling. 3 days later, the village was shaken by the news Leo Alkex failed Chagall. While in the hospital, there was nothing to do. Asked his wife to bring from home something he had left from art, and all days long he painted. When the picture was ready, it was seen by one of the patients, who immediately offered Leo to write more paintings for a real exhibition. Leo, telling everyone, said that he no longer drank because great things awaited him. "Jacob, you have a visitor. Is the visitor not a patient?" "No, he doesn't look like a patient. But let him come into the office." Martin came in. He didn't look as great as he did in the cafe. Jacob immediately pressed his lips together, stood up, then obliged. Martin looked at him. "And I came to you for help. I really need your help. What makes you think I'm going to help you?" "Because I don't know why. Maybe because you broke up with Molly's mother for some reason." "Jacob, I don't know why the exchange of belligerent fervor went away. Have a seat now that you're here. I'm listening to Martin. I couldn't start for a long time. Then he started talking. He spoke without any emotion, just laying out one by one the facts he had learned from his mother. By the end of the story, Jacob understood perfectly well that in front of him sat the same victim of deception as he himself had once become. "Martin, even if I agree to help you, there is no guarantee that Molly will forgive you. You realize she's out on the street with no money, no place to live, pregnant." Martin looked up at Jacob. "I mean, I'm right, Zach. My son is yours, of course. Who else would it be? Help me. Just one thing. I need Molly to listen to me." Molly stuffed and dialed the windows. The door slammed and she turned around and froze. It was her father, and behind him stood Martin. What the hell? What was he doing here? Jacob raised his hand. "Molly, we haven't been in contact with you that long, of course. But you know I don't want to hurt you. I'm just asking you to listen to Martin. Then, after you've listened, you can chase him away, even beat him up." Do you think he has something interesting to say, another incredible story to tell? Or are moms more inclined to tell stories? Martin sullenly remained silent. Then Molly looked at her watch. You have exactly 10 minutes, and that's only because Daddy asked. Jacob stepped out so he wouldn't interrupt the conversation. He was sure that Molly still loved that loner. Except her pride. Half an hour had passed. The house was quiet, and Jacob decided to return. He opened the door and froze. Molly and Martin were standing in the middle of the room, hugging, when they both heard Jacob. Then from Zero and from each other, Jacob laughed. I see our family is getting bigger and bigger. Molly smiled embarrassedly at Dad. What a fool I was. It turns out that Martin is shaking his head stubbornly. No, the biggest fool in this situation is me. Jacob didn't have time to answer anything because his phone rang. It was Andrew. Jacob, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Why the mysterious voice? Are they packing their bags? Peter has been dishonorably banished. Is your rightful place waiting for you? Jacob exhaled, that's news, but no muse. But you're an excellent surgeon and neighborhood hospitals are not enough for your scale. Jacob hung up the phone, confused, turned to Molly. Here is back, Molly, smiled and hugged him. Daddy, it's good your place in a real hospital. Especially since we've decided to go back too. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Duck, I guess you two should get married. Martin and Molly laughed. Papa, neither of us ever bothered to get a divorce. Many people came to see off the surgeon and Martin and Zach. Even Lucy came, though she didn't come close to everyone. She stood aside. Colleagues arranged Jacob fancy send-off, and today he even has a little headache. Molly saw what was sneaking up on her. Julia is tanned and beautiful. Molly, can I give you a hug? I never realized what an attentive and loving husband I have. Thank you. A car stopped at the gate, and no one got out for a long time. Martin looked at it anxiously. Finally, the door opened and Lisa came into the light. Martin jerked toward her, but Molly held him back. The woman didn't look her best. She leaned against the car and stood like that. Molly approached her. Are you all right? Lisa looked at her and cried. Can you forgive me for being such a fool? When I found out I had a grandson, it turned me upside down. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Molly stared into Lisa's eyes for a long time, trying to find a single drop of deceit, but she couldn't. She smiled afterward. I guess I'll have to forgive you. We're family. Anyone can make a mistake. Martin breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what his mom had done, she was still his mom. And he couldn't turn his back on her anyway. And it would be very hard to choose between Molly and his mom. Martin picked Zach up in his arms and said, Shall we go meet Grandma? Zach's eyes rounded in surprise. And then there are relatives. There are so many. Martin laughed. It happens. And we're also hoping that Mommy will give you a brother or sister. As soon as possible.